Okay, excellent. Daniel, it's great to meet you. Thank you, sir, for taking a minute out for the program. I appreciate it.
Nice, glad to be here.
So, I want to get in, before we get into your expertise being a
Mhm.
product design expert, I want to know, surviving this pandemic and getting through that COVID time period was quite a thing. And it still has created lasting impacts that we're dealing with in 2024. What kind
Mhm.
of effects did that time period set upon you now that you deal with as a busy pro?
Oh, like that's a hard one straight from the beginning. I guess there are a couple of things actually. Like I work with a lot of startups and mentor startups, so that professionally, there was a somewhat lot of money in the market back then, which now started to not be so much. So they started to feel, in a way, the pressure to become profitable quite soon. They don't raise money that much, so hence they don't have that amount of money that they had before to pay professionals like I am to work with them. So professionally, it's definitely a bit more challenging, and I assume the whole market is kind of on the same track with layoffs and stuff like that. On the personal side, I have a daughter. She's born in the pandemic. So the first couple of months, when we went like to just meet people around, it was very panicky for her.
Yeah.
But even for us, like being in inside in the in-house for quite some time, and we don't have the same amount of freedom to just move around as you wish. It in a way leaves some marks on you. I picked up therapy after a couple of months or around a year after that, and it was very, very helpful. So definitely, I would say if you had some kind of anxieties before, it quite accelerated during that.
Certainly did. So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily
Hmm.
basis in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. It's career day. Let's say third
Oh, nice.
graders, 10, 11 year olds. One of the kids in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
The easiest way to answer is like I make sure that the apps that they use works the way they would like to work.
Okay. So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your ultimate dream to grow up and become?
Wow, I went through a bunch of stuff. I would say from police officer to lawyer to I don't know, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I get it.
But definitely not what I ended up being. So that came quite late.
So, how did this happen? Take me back to where you were born and raised, and what were the foundational seeds in your childhood that were planted that had you get into technology and making things work?
Oh wow. So I don't know how much you know about Romania. Romania is basically transition. When I was born, it transitioned from being a communist country to slowly starting the democracy part and stuff like that. So people started to have access to like going to the store and buy stuff, but the stores were still quite empty. New jobs started to appear, stuff like this. And I remember my parents saying a lot of times, look, you have to learn to not end up as like we had been like working class citizens, stuff like that. So it was a big push for us to learn and to do good in school. That was one of the main things for our parents back then. And when I started to be around like fifth grade, I guess that was around the time when I got my first computer, and then we slowly started to learn that there is something like I don't know how much people are still using it, but we had torrents back then. Like downloaded a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
that we didn't pay for it, and this is how I learned. I learned Photoshop and a bunch of other tools. So in a way, this is how I transitioned into being a designer. But like in school, I was doing. Uh, what was back then C++ and like these basic coding languages because I was in math and IT. Uh, and though my parents pushed quite a lot to go to the university, I tried 2 times and I ended up not doing it. And that's not a good thing for if there are any students listening. So don't do that. It's not the best thing. I skipped it because I didn't found anything that I liked. Uh, and then yeah, moving from these like creating business cards and like posters and these kind of playing around with Photoshop, I ended up working in a small digital agency. Mostly we were still doing like business cards and print stuff, but like designing basic things. And from there, by a friend, I ended up in another company that we would call today a startup studio. Back then, it was basically a company that owned some digital products, and it was so fancy in a small city that has less than 200,000 people around it. oh, you were doing some interesting stuff on the computers. And like, yeah, let's try it out. I started editing photos for them because they had a side project that then failed. And this is how I ended up doing something that we called like an associate product manager, basically doing research for one of their products. And then when that started to phase out, I ended up doing UX design and mostly UI in the beginning for one of the products that actually were doing quite well. And I worked hand in hand with one of the PMs from there. And we are still friends. We are still working on some projects after like I don't know, almost 10 years now. So yeah, it was a transition from learning a lot in school, doing math, and then doing like coding stuff, like those basic coding stuff. And even then, I remember like in the ninth and tenth grade, I was like very interested in how we show the questions on the screen, not just like how you code that, I don't know, 5 + 10 equal 15, these kind of stuff, but basic, very basic coding skills we had back then. Uh, and then downloading Photoshop, doing business cards, and from business cards, editing photos, and then ending up around products.
So, what was the first project that you did that you satisfied the client and you felt like this was what you needed to be doing with your life? Being an entrepreneur, doing this on your own.
The first UX project that I did was, it was like 15 years ago. Um, It was a flipbook maker in browser. So there was a tool that basically let you upload a PDF and they transformed it into a flipbook that you can like flip. It's still a thing today. They still exist and it makes a good amount of money from what I know. What we wanted to do basically, there was a drop off because some people didn't know how to create those things in like the fancy tools that were back then. So they had to have like Adobe InDesign or these kind of tools to create the PDF and then they upload it on our site. And what we created, and I worked on that from straight from the beginning, is basically a tool in which you could create all of the pages. Or if you had the PDF, you can like add videos and buttons and shopping carts and all kind of stuff inside. So you create, instead of like having a very static PDF, you create something that's more interactive and people can like interact with it and even buy products from that thing. That's one of the first big UX projects. And being the transitioning to entrepreneurship, honestly, it happened by mistake. I was doing freelancing for a company on the side and working with another part-time gig. And I wanted to transition from the one part-time gig to the other one as a full-time employee or at least a part-time employee. And when I mentioned to these guys that I want to leave and we signed all the papers and stuff, the other ones mentioned that they can't hire me anymore because they don't have any money. So, well, this is how you end up being an entrepreneur, you know?
So, who's been kind of a hero? Who's been an inspiration for you in your work?
Oh, I know. I learned a lot of stuff from reading. I'm self-taught, so back then I started to just read whatever I could. So I still have two books that I recommend a lot for UX people that just start out, though you have a bunch of stuff nowadays, but there are two. One of them it's Rocket Surgery Made Easy and Don't Make Me Think. It's by Steve Crook, both of them. So this is the I don't know anything else about him, just these two books. This is the stuff that I started with. And then I just started having discussions with people that are working in the field, especially lately in the last like couple of years when I started the agency as well. And I reached out to people like Andy Budd. He's the guy who started the first UX agency in London, and we had some calls. And he always has some interesting takes on a lot of my issues. And like even friends that I grew up with, it was a weird combination here with like we were doing design back then in the days, but we ended up very in different paths. A lot of our friend, at least a lot of my generation went towards branding, and I went towards the UX, but it was honestly total mistake. I ended up working in a product company. They ended up working with different clients, and that was how things switched. Uh, but yeah, kind of I wouldn't say I have one hero. I have a lot of people that helped me at different stage. Like even people that had trust in me when I started in the company, and I'm still, as I mentioned, good friends with most of them. And yeah, those help me guide and like just move to the next step and learn the new things and move to the next step again and like learn what you need for that. And just guiding you in a way the transition. And I assume, and this is one of the things that actually helped a lot last couple of years, is just finding those people that are like a couple of steps in front of you. So they're not like far away heroes kind of people. It's like, oh, they walked the path, but they still remember how it was in the trenches,
Yeah.
and having discussions with those people. So I was always trying to find those kind of small guides, if you. I'm
And you
not a big
bring
hero guy.
Yeah, no, I get it. And you bring up a good point. The one thing about being in technology is that things change so fast, you have to stay in
Hmm.
step. You have to
Yeah, yeah.
move with evolution of technology. How do you do that? How do you do your job well because you have clients that need things done, but also stay up on being current and evolving with modern times?
I try to read a lot and read a lot of newsletters, honestly. Like time to time, I sign up to different newsletters and then I unsubscribe when I find that it's not a good fit for me. But I keep those that are in a way almost like a collection of resources. So I read a lot on UX because that's my thing, but I also read a lot on product because that's very connected to what I do, and I also like that area. Nowadays, I started to subscribe to some AI newsletters just to see like kind of what's the vibe and what they are talking about and how things are moving. But definitely reading newsletters. I'm not a big podcast guy, so I'm listening from time to time, but I'm the reader. So I really like to read and go through and highlight stuff. Reading books also. This is how I started. I still find it the easiest way to actually get into the details of something. So yeah, kind of that's it. Newsletters, books, and blog posts, and following some people on LinkedIn that they have some interesting takes on what's happening.
So, at the end of the day, of all of these things that you've done and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
No, no, that's a tough question. You have a lot of tough questions. Uh, There are two things. Like I'm a father, that's definitely one of the things that I'm very proud of. And I would say I have a good relationship with my daughter, hopefully. We'll see. She's now 3.5, so for now it's easy. We'll see when she's like 10.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. But also the studio. So even if it's not a big studio yet, it has a lot of potential. We have some interesting clients, and we are now at the point where we started to figure out what's a good fit client and what's a good fit service for our client. So I would say that's the other one. So I'm somewhat proud of my professional stuff and somewhat proud of my family and daughter and wife.
Yeah.
And yeah, kind of that's it.
So, of when you look back on your professional career, of everything that you've done and
Mhm.
evolved into up to this point, what's the biggest risk that you ever took?
Hmm. Definitely one of them was moving from a full-time job to freelancing. That was one of them back then.
Yeah.
But I was in a way very cautious and like doing step by step. So even when I moved first was part-time this, part-time that, and then by mistake ended up full-time freelancing. And then lately I would say started to invest more on learning, so courses and boot camps and stuff like that. That was more expensive than before. And honestly, some I would say that nowadays there is also a good thing and a bad thing. The fact that you have access to a lot of information, but sometimes you don't know what is the right one, and you have to figure it out. And if you talk courses, then figuring out costs you money.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran into a much younger version of you, an 18-year-old version, hungry and ready to go out in the world, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way, what advice would you give that young version of you?
Ooh, do it and travel a lot.
Yeah, totally get it. Totally get it. So everyone out there has a perception of you. Family,
Mhm.
friends, all of your clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Hmm. I will say the first thing that came to my mind. I honestly kind of said the first thing to all of your questions. But the first thing that came to my mind, I'm very anxious. I'm definitely very anxious, but I managed to go past that and deliver the stuff that needs to be delivered. And I'm very process oriented in almost anything that I do.
Are you nervous about AI or are you good with it?
50-50.
Okay, I get that.
I think it's something that we need and is definitely helpful, but still we don't know how it will impact a lot of our stuff that we do.
Yeah. So if anyone out there would like to hire you, reach out, have questions, any of the good business in your world, where can they go?
LinkedIn is the easiest way to find me.
Okay. All right. Daniel, this has been wonderful. Thank you for giving me a
Thank you.
portal into the future and a look into your world. I appreciate it. Have a great holiday season and a wonderful 2025.
Thanks. Wish you the same and really nice being here. I really enjoyed it.
It's been fun. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.